Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me here again today on my new channel, The Mandrake Mechanism, the channel where we go over central reserve banking, fractional reserve banking, and the US dollar's world reserve petro status. Today on episode 3, we're going to be going over and looking back at the history, specifically banking in England, since that's where the mother of all central banks spawn. I'm going to be going into and looking directly at the struggles and adversities that England had with its money lenders that led to a courageous victory over the banking cabal.
Make it yours! Make it England!
Just kidding. There is a tit for tat, but they lose terribly, which leads to all of us being the debt slaves that we currently are in this modern day.
I want to punch you in the face so bad right now.
Sorry. So with that being said, let's look back to how we ended up where we are in our current position. If that sounds interesting to you, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, help me get this content out there, help have other people be aware of the history so they can better be informed and make decisions now and moving forward. Also too, be sure, I'll put the link below, follow me on Twitter, my handle is @MandrakeMech. Thank you so much, and with no further ado, let's jump right into it. So let's find out what happened in the past to better understand where we are today. We'll start with some quotes for some British individuals that will help set the theme for the history, because we can always trust the word of the Brits.
And again, with the Gatling gun in the bottom of St. Regis tea kettle, yes. And then she sat on a turtle.
So, the money powers take England. In its June 20th, 1934 issue, New Britain magazine of London cited a devastating assertion by former British Prime Minister David Lloyd George that, quote, "Britain is the slave of an international financial bloc," end quote. The next set of quotes comes from ex-British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, where the first quote goes, "The world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes." The next quote, "All great events have been distorted, most of the important causes concealed. If the history of England is ever written by the one who has the knowledge and courage, the world would be astonished." Now the next quote comes from another Rothschild, a great person, Amschel Rothschild, where he said, "Give me control of the economics of a country, and I care not who makes her laws. The few who understand the system will either be so interested from its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class." So the next quote comes from an astute parliamentarian, William Cobbett, who said, "I set to read the Act of Parliament by which the Bank of England was created. The investors knew what they were about. Their design was to mortgage by degrees the whole country, lands, houses, property, and labor. This scheme has produced what the world has never seen before, starvation in the midst of abundance." So you can kind of see here that there is very big warning signs coming from some highly astute politicians and members of government. So now jumping into the history, we're going to start with King Offa. King Offa ruled the kingdom of Mercia, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which was central England from 757 to 791 AD. He was a wise and able administrator and a kind-hearted leader. He established the first money system in England. On account of the scarcity of gold, he used silver for coinage and as a store of wealth. The standard unit of exchange was a pound of silver divided into 240 pennies. The pennies were stamped with a stera, Old English for star, from which the word sterling is derived. In 787, King Offa introduced a new statute prohibiting usury. Now, I know what some of you were thinking out there.
What the hell are you talking about?
Usury is just when you lend money with interest attached to it. So moving forward, the laws of usury were only further entrenched by King Alfred, who directed that the property of usurers be forfeited. Then, in 1050, King Edward the Confessor decreed not only forfeiture, but that a usurer be declared an outlaw and be banished for life. So you can really see there's a huge detest against the moneylenders for using usury on the money lent to individuals. Now, unfortunately, this is where the tides turn towards the sovereign nation of England and the royalty. Then in 1066, following the death of King Edward, William the Conqueror, who is sometimes referred to as the Bastard King because he was the first Norman king of England, took over rulership and allowed the, quote, Jewish moneylenders to arrive in England. He did so for they, the moneylenders, financed the very military invasion giving William the throne. For their support, the moneylenders were richly rewarded by being allowed to practice usury under royal protection. Now, the consequences are disastrous for the English people. Within 2 generations, 1/4 of all English lands were in the hands of the usurers. By 1186, Aaron Lincoln, who was the largest moneylender of all, died with a wealth estimated to be larger than King Henry II. So just crazy.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
So, moving forward just a very short period, by the beginning of the 13th century, many English nobles were in danger of losing their lands through usury and taxation. They had on one side the moneylenders' excessive use of usury, and on the other side they had King John, who was utterly reckless with his overtaxation, which was equally stripping the nobles of their lands. So at a certain point here, the nobles get together collectively and they kind of come up with the same individual thought when it comes to handing over more property.
You know.
How about new?
So that's why on June 15th, 1215, the nobles revolted and forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. Now, this document consisted of 61 clauses establishing various constitutional and legal rights, but the principal purpose of the document, however, was to cancel the bonds of the moneylenders and abolish all their use of usury. So you can see here, this is the beginning of England going back and having more power given to the sovereign and less of the money lenders. Then to go a step further, King John's grandson, King Edward I, in 1233 and 1275 created statutes against the moneylenders which were passed to abolish all forms of usury. Then again, on July 19th, 1290, another statute was passed compelling the entire Jewish money lender population of 16,500 to leave England forever. So this is a huge blow. Now everything's kind of back to the King Offa stage of 757. So with tolerable taxes, no state debt, no interest to pay, and having more disposable money.
Oh, $20. I wanted a peanut. $20 can buy many peanuts. Explain how. Money can be exchanged for goods and services. Woohoo!
England enjoyed a period of unparalleled growth and prosperity. The average laborer worked only 14 weeks and enjoyed 160 to 180 holidays. According to Lord William Leatherhume, a writer of the time, quote, "The men of the 15th century were very well paid," end quote. The people's standard of living and purchasing power of their wages would not be beat until past the 19th century. So moving to King Henry VIII, he relaxed the laws regarding usury in 1509 when he broke away from the Catholic Church. So now the tide anyways is starting to go back the other direction. But they were subsequently repealed by his son, King Edward VI, by an act of 1552, whose preamble stated that, quote, "Usury is by word of God utterly prohibited as a vice most odious and detestable." So just shortly after that, this was directly preceded by Queen Mary taking power and continuing King Edward's ideals in regards to money. In order to do so, she had to drastically reduce the money supply since the money lenders had inflated it so much. This was accomplished with the help of her half-sister Elizabeth I, who successfully avoided the usury trap by supplementing the money supply with metal coins issued by the public treasury. The coins were made of metal, but the value, quote unquote, came from the stamp of the sovereign on them. Now, this was established as a matter of legal precedent in 1600 when Queen Elizabeth I, 1558 to 1603, was challenged on these actions in the highest court of the land after she issued the same style of worthless coins to Ireland. The court ruled, however, that it was the sovereign's sole prerogative to create the money of the realm. What the sovereign declared money was money. This decision was so absolutely detested that the merchant class, goldsmiths, and later the British East India Company worked incessantly to destroy it. This came from just a few key events. So, taking back the crown for the second time, part 1. So, King Charles I wished to maintain the preeminence of the Anglican Church, but this began to be contested by a group called the Roundheads, led by Oliver Cromwell, who believed in the post-Anglican Church, the Protestant Church, or more so and more accurate, the Church of England. The moneylenders took advantage of this dispute and financed a civil war from 1642 to 1648.
It's war!
Gaining Oliver Cromwell the throne. For this, Cromwell fights for their very return back to England, and in December of 1655, he holds a conference in order to obtain approval for a large-scale immigration. Now, even though there was an overwhelming opposition, in 1656, the first set of moneylenders began to land freely in England. So shortly after following Cromwell's death, the throne was taken back by the son of the executed King Charles, who was executed due to Cromwell, King Charles II. This would be the last time a king was to issue sovereign money in his own right, as it was with him in a devastating error that created the Free Coinage Act, which only gave more power to the money lenders. So what's the Free Coinage Act? The Free Coinage Act of 1666 permitted private persons, i.e. bankers and goldsmiths, to mint the coins of the realm at the royal mint. The power to issue money, which had for centuries been the sole right of the king, was transferred into private hands, giving bankers the power to cause inflations and depressions at will by issuing or withholding their gold coin. Now we're going to look at a quote from Alexander Del Mar, 1895, because it just sums it up so beautifully. Quote, "This opened the way for the foreign elements to establish a new monarch and to reconstitute the money prerogative in the hands of a specific group of financiers, not elected, not representing society, and a large part not even English." So here comes the second and final attempt at the crown. When King Charles II passes in 1685 and his brother James II takes the throne, the money cabal saw their next chance to take the country. Here steps in Prince William of Orange, whose beginnings started as a Dutch aristocrat. He was founded and funded and given a military by the Dutch moneylenders of Amsterdam, no different than William the Conqueror of 1066 being funded by the moneylenders of Normandy. Now, William, he wins and takes England in 1689. Now, the new King William III was soon at war with King Louis XIV of France. To finance his war, he borrowed 1.2 million pounds in gold from the moneylenders whose names were to be kept secret. The money was to be raised by a novel device that is still issued by governments today. Now, this is important because here's the mechanism that every central bank uses. The lenders would issue a permanent loan on which the interest would be paid, but the principal portion of the loan would not be repaid. The loan also came with strings attached. And here we go. 1. The lenders were to be granted a charter to establish a Bank of England, which would issue banknotes that would circulate as the national paper currency. Now, 2. The bank would create banknotes out of nothing, with a fraction of them being backed by a coin. Banknotes created and lent to the government would be backed mainly by government IOUs, which would serve as the reserves for creating additional loans to private parties. Now, 3. Interest of 8% will be paid by the government on its loans, marking the birth of the national debt. Now, 4 and final, the lenders would be allowed to secure payment of the national debt by direct taxation of the people. Taxes were immediately imposed on a whole range of goods to pay the interest owed to the bank. Now, what were these slew of taxes? The slew of taxes that were created included, but were not limited to, land, paper, salt, stamp, births, marriages, deaths, and even bachelors, which I don't know what that means, how you would tax bachelors. But the most punitive tax of all being the income tax, which was levied at a rate of 20%. Now keep this point in your head for moving forward for my next video, because this is very important. The most punitive tax of all being the income tax. You're going to see a trend with that with the central banks. So what's next? War and debt slavery in perpetuity. Henceforth, a pattern would emerge where unnecessary wars would be embarked upon, which simultaneously increased the national debt and the profits of the usurers. Significantly, most of these wars were started against countries that had implemented interest-free state banking systems. So that's what happens. The money powers realize that the more war, the more action they have, they can even finance both sides. It's just more of a win-win for them.
You just want to make your money.
And this is also a real big issue of what's going on today. They need perpetual war. They need perpetual conflict to finance their money machine. That being said, that's it. Join me next time where I can continue this history with French and American central banking history, where that's where the next targets of the Bank of England really put their focus on. So thank you so much again for joining me here today. And if you like that, please be sure to like, share, subscribe. Help me get this content out there. Help me help other people become aware of what's really truly going on and what's pushing our economical system in the direction that it is. Also too, be sure, I'll put the link below. Follow me on Twitter. My handle is @MandrakeMech, where I put up a lot of more frequent updates throughout every single day. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you next time.